Father in heaven, we thank you for the opportunity to be here together and learn of your word. Lord, we ask for your Holy Spirit to touch our understandings, Lord. Open thou our ears that we may understand wonderful things out of thy law. And please be with Theodore as he teaches us this morning, Lord. And touch his lips with a coal off the altar, Lord. Forgive us of our sins that we may draw near to you at this time. In your name we pray. Amen.
Good morning again. And you should have one of these sheets, but I might not have printed out enough looking at all the people. So if you do need one, later, it's nice to have. And I didn't quite edit it properly because I don't have all the letters numbered, or all the letters of Samuel Snow's numbered properly in the timeline, because I left out the May 1st letter. And also there are 2 articles of his that are published on August 22nd. So I only put the one there in the list. So you'll see there's 6 gray numbers and there's 8 different letters. So the May 1st letter's not in the timeline, and the last one, the prophetic chronology, is not in the timeline. So, but we'll look at these. So what we're doing right now, obviously, we laid out, so just a quick review, we laid out from 457 BC. So this is events in 457 BC that we find from Ezra 7 to 10. And these events create 2 prophetic mirrors, one marking Pentecost on the 6th day of the 3rd month, and another one marking the Day of Atonement. This is Christ's inauguration of his work in the holy place. This is Christ moving from the holy to the most holy place. This, of course, occurs in the midst of the week in 31 AD, and this occurs October 22nd, 1844. And then we could see that these are the dates that are given us in Ezra, and they all have 3 days attached to them. And this one I put the 3 on the wrong side. It goes here. So we have the gold and silver is given to the priests 3 days before they leave the river Ahava on the 12th day of the 1st month, and they arrive at Jerusalem on the 1st day of the 5th month and wait 3 days before they give the gold and silver to the temple. And so we can create that chiasm by looking at these 3 days as a mirror. And then these ones, we have the 3 days before the 20th day of the 9th month. And the center of this is the 10th day of the 7th month. And of course, we know this chiasm here that marks midnight, which is July 21st in Boston, when Samuel Snow declared that it was midnight. And this is Exeter, when the midnight cry was empowered. So we call this midnight, the midnight cry. And of course, the 1st day of the 1st month and the 10th day of the 7th month in 1844. So these are all events in 1844. So now we're going to look at Samuel Snow's letters. And we did, actually, in the afternoon class yesterday, we laid them out on a line. But we're going to go a little bit more in detail with laying them out on a line. And we also have looked at Samuel Snow's first 4 articles that were published prior to 1844. We looked at them in the first afternoon class last week. And these letters, to me, they're significant. They're not as significant as what we see in 1844, because that is the message of the midnight cry. But these letters prefigure some of the midnight cry based on their contents and their placement. So I don't know if I want to deal with this too much, but so I'm not going to write these on the board because they take up a little bit of room. At least I won't write all of them. But he has a first article, Letter from Samuel Snow, which we went through, some of these talk about his conversion. There's one on November 22nd, 1842, where he basically predicts himself. He talks about that God's going to be sending a prophet. And that date, November 22nd, is significant because it's in November 22nd in 977 BC that we have the prophecy of Josiah being given. And that's, in that date, in 977, it was the 15th day of the 8th month. So that's when Jeroboam is offering up this offering in the altar on this fake feast day that he made to counterfeit what was happening in Judah. And, of course, the disobedient prophet comes to him and tells him the prophecy of Josiah. And in the year 1842, that date, November 22nd, is a different date on the Jewish calendar. It's not the 15th day of the 8th month. It's the 18th day of the 8th month. So, but we still have the date November 22nd. And the reason why that's important, why would November 22nd be important? Tanya, November 22nd, why would it be important?
11/22.
Yeah, so 11/22. So 11 is a doubling, 22 is a doubling, and we have all these 22s.
Revelation 22:11.
In Revelation 22:11. What's that
Yeah.
one?
He that is just, let him be just.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And basically that represents November 22nd, November 22nd, 1844 and 9/11.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously these dates, November 22nd, I would think is significant. Now the letter is, if I look at it here, I'm just checking out. Yeah, the letter is published. So that's when it was written. And it's published on December 7th in 1842. And the December 7th date, it's just to note that if you look at the 20th day of the 9th month in 457, at the end of your chart, you'll see that that date, when they have their confession, is December 7th. So whether that's really something, some of these things could be just coincidences and don't mean anything, but some of these we are definitely structural things that aren't coincidences. But I do want you to note that this fourth letter of, let me see here. So this is the one that's, I'm just trying to sort this out, what this is here. What did I write? Oh. So the significance of this date, December 7th, so it's kind of like a chain of things. So December 7th is the 4th day of the 9th month. And the 4th day of the 9th month is also December 7th in 518 BC. And in 518 BC, we have Zechariah 7, verse 1. And Zechariah 7, verse 1 is the one where Zechariah talks about the 70 years desolation of the temple, not of the Babylonian captivity. It's one of those verses. We did look at this, and this is the one where they talk about their fasting in the 5th month and the 6th month for 70 years. And the reason why it's interesting is because Zechariah 1:7, which is an inversion of 7 verse 1, is where they give the date when he talks again, where the first time he mentions the 70 years. And that date is February 16th. And so Zechariah 7:1 and Zechariah 1:7, to me, tie together these 270 years about the desolation of the temple. And one of the things we see that this is all about, it's all about the temple. And we have the dedication of the temple that follows that. So I know not everybody followed what I was talking about if you didn't go through Zechariah chapter 7 verse 1 and 1 verse 7 that give you the dates. The actual reference to the 70 years is in Zechariah 7 verse 5 and Zechariah 1 verse 12. So you can note those. So I'm not going to write them down on the board. But what we want to look at now is actually Samuel Snow's letters in 1844. Oh, and even before we go there, he does his personal testimony on December 31st, 1843. So the hour year, 1843, which is where Miller first looked at, and that's what this represents on the charts, is 1843, January 1st to December 31st. That's the way they first understood the year 1843. They weren't using Jewish calendars to give these dates when they made the chart. So Samuel Snow, on the last day of that year, gives his personal testimony at the Boston Tabernacle. And that is published later in February 28th. And it's also published in the Midnight Cry. I can't remember if that's like March 7th or something like that. But is that kind of, you understand what I'm talking about in that it's closing off that year 1843 in their initial understanding. And so Samuel Snow now is being marked, he's the one who's going to be giving their new understanding, this increase of light on the calendars. So I think it's significant that he does his personal testimony on December 31st. So now let's look at his first letter. So we know that in January and February, Samuel Snow had already been presenting this idea that he had started thinking about the summer before, in the summer of 1843. And he's now actively promoting the idea that Jesus is coming in the fall, not in the spring. So Samuel Snow wouldn't have been disappointed at the first disappointment, because he would have recognized what was happening. And this first letter is published, as we noted before, on February 22, which is the third day of the 12th month. So this is the date of the dedication of the temple in 515 BC. And it's republished on, if we're looking at, this is in the year 457 BC, in the year 1844, there is a 13th month. So in 1844, they're adding an extra month in here. So if we're going to look at this date, it would actually be the 14th day of the 13th month. But the Jews kept the Passover believing this was the 14th day of the first month. So this is the Passover, and this is April 3rd, and this is published in the Signs of the Times. So for the Jews, this was the Passover that marked that they would have based on the rabbinic calendar. But they were incorrect in that there should have been a 13th month added in 1844, which the Millerites did add in calculating their date, October 22nd, 1844. So this letter is published twice, but it was first written February 16th, and this date is, I believe it's the 28th day, it should say there, 28th day of the 11th month. Doesn't really matter because at least I don't know of any significance of that date or it's actually the 27th day. Which did I put here? Yeah, I always get that one mixed up. So the 27th day. No? Yes, okay, it's the 27th day. I'll change that. I can't remember every number. And you can see these dates in your notes if you look at the calendar. And originally I know I had the wrong date for that one, that's why. So when we look at this calendar, let's look in your notes, the structure of prophetic chronology. And you have a calendar for 1843 and 1844. So this is a useful tool. It's much nicer in color in your PDF file. if you get it. It's page 87. It's at the back. And you can see here, I didn't number the months, but in the middle there you have Nisan. Right in the middle of this calendar is the month Nisan that starts with April 19th. And you can see if you go back, there is this correct? No, this doesn't look like. Oh yes, V8R is right next to it. So you see the one to the left of it is V8R. That's the 13th month. And then 8R, that add with the February, that's the 12th month. And then you can see that this calendar, it's a little bit confusing to read. So the top numbers in each of those boxes are the months on the Jewish calendar. So they're always going to start with the first. But the date underneath it, like if you look in the top left corner, it starts in Tishri 1, which is September 26th in 1843. And then the next month is Heshvan, which is October 26th. And the next month is Kislev, which is November 24th. And then you got Tebeth and Shevet and all these different months. So I probably should have just numbered them instead of putting the Hebrew names. But I was doing it originally for myself. And so what we have anyway in looking at these, if you look at February 16th, oh, that's right. It is a mistake. So February 16th. It should be the 26th of the 11th month, not the 27th, unless this calendar is not right. So I had actually adjusted this calendar, so I'm not sure if this is the correct calendar or not. Because when I first did these calendars, I assumed that they went 30, 29, 30, 29, 30, 29. And then at the end of the year, so this one might be correct. So I think the 27th is wrong. I think it's the 26th. Doesn't really matter. The most important thing is to see that when we look at the date, February 22nd, and the next one, so that's Adar. It says at the top 3, that's third Adar, which is the 12th month. Adar is the 12th month. The third day, that's February 22nd. So it doesn't really matter about this date. It's either the 26th or the 27th. But February 22nd is the third of Adar, or the 12th month. Now, when we look at each of these, and we're going to lay them out, we're going to see, and you can see there's a chiasm there, but I'll explain a little bit of how this works. So his second letter is published on the 14th day of the first month. And this, of course, is the correct Passover, and this date is May 2nd. And this is the Passover. So this is the Jewish Passover. And this is the biblical. And we saw that this April 3rd letter, when we were looking at it, or the April 3rd publication of his first letter. So his first letter is written here on February 16th. It's published in the Midnight Cry on February 22nd, and it's republished in the Signs of the Times with a disclaimer saying that it is incorrect, that there are going to be no prophetic periods that extend beyond the last day of the Jewish year, 1843. And it's either Joshua V. Himes or Sylvester Bliss who writes that, but it's most likely Joshua V. Himes, who writes that disclaimer, saying that we don't accept Samuel Snow's conclusions, that he has too many mistakes. But this May 2nd letter is undated, and this one is really important because this is the one that has the death warrant of Jesus Christ, which is fake news. So that means it was not a real, there was no document, copper plate, with the death warrant on it that was found by any archaeologist. Because if you trace it back, you find that all the sources that they claim that they got it from have no record of it. So they quote often this French newspaper in New York there's no record that they ever, because I've looked at it, right? Looked through all the archives, because they're all online. And most of the papers that they even say they got it from never ever published it. So they just use fake sources. And of course, nobody has ever heard of it. And also, when you see the article in different places, it has different dates, it has different forms of it, and things like that went around all the time in the Millerite time period because their newspapers were like Facebook. They just had all kinds of things that were just interesting reading, made up stories to sell newspapers, right? So this death warrant, which is a fake news story, is attached to this event here. And we're going to look at that in more detail. But one of the things about it is that what Samuel Snow is presenting in this article is the crucifixion of Christ in the midst of the week in 31 AD. So he's writing or publishing an article. When he wrote it, we don't know. But it's on the Passover that it's published. And it's dealing with the Passover in 31 AD. But also, it's dealing with this chiasm, right? Because this is Christ's chiasm, this transition from earthly to heavenly, the 70th week. And so he's looking at this and saying that Jesus was crucified in the midst of the week, not at the end of the week like Miller was teaching. And so this is a very significant, this article. Now we have another article which I didn't know about before, but it's on May 1st. And the May 1st article is published in the Signs of the Times, which I believe is published on Wednesday, and the Midnight Cry is published on Thursday. So it was published in the Signs of the Times, and in this one, he deals with false teachers. So he says that these people who have rejected us and mocked us are false teachers. And so we're going to talk about the significance of this as we look at it. But I just didn't put it down in here. It's just not enough room to write it in. But there is a May 1st letter. Now his what I always called his third letter, but I guess it's his fourth letter, is June 22nd. So now he has a letter that's published on the 6th day of the 3rd month, or not published, written. And this is June 22nd. Now this, of course, we know is Pentecost, the 6th day of the 3rd month. So you can see, as we lay these down, he has letters that are published on the dedication of the temple, the Jewish Passover, the correct Passover, and now Pentecost. And that we can see in 457 BC that Pentecost was already marked. So it's significant in 457 BC as part of a chiasm that illustrates midnight with these two periods of 54 days that become symbols of the 5th day of the 4th month. And of course, also the 107 days that deals with the close of this prophetic period, which is what his message is all about, pointing to here. So it becomes this interlinked chain or structure that obviously can't happen by chance. So we can see this structure, and it's very important to see it. Now we have some more things that we have to look at. So he then wrote another letter. Now this letter was written on June 29th, and we're going to deal with all these dates in more detail in a moment. But it was published July 18th. So one of the things we had was this symbol of 3 days. And 3 days became a prediction, or a symbol of the prediction before midnight. And Tabo laid that out for us. So we can see here that his last letter is published 3 days before he speaks at Boston. So we're going to put this 3 days here. Maybe this would be a situation where I'd maybe use red or something, but I didn't. And this is published then July 18th, which is the 7th month, the 18th day. And you can see that in this structure here of the prophetic mirror, or the chronological mirror that points to midnight, it has 187 days. And if we did 18th day, 7th month, we would see we get on our calendar the 7th month, the 18th day. So the connection between midnight and this prediction, this last letter, is tied together with this number 3 and also with the 187 days of the prophetic mirror pointing to midnight. So I know it starts to become a little bit more, there's more involved the more we look at it, that all these things are pulling together these different structures, but they're all pointing to the same thing, the significance of Samuel Snow's letters. Yes?
Could you repeat when he wrote the July 18th?
Yeah, I'm going to. So I'm going to deal with the writings of these letters in a moment. So we'll leave after that. So one of the things that I looked at when I looked at these letters, there were some things that bothered me. One is I could see that some of the letters, the publishing dates become the significant dates. Right? This is a publishment date, publishment, this is published. But this one here, the Pentecost, is the date it's written. And so that bothered me because I said, shouldn't the date that it's published be the significant date? Why is the date that it's written not significant? And then I started thinking about this first letter, and it was written on February 16th, and again, it's not a significant date on the Jewish calendar. There's no date that I could find in any of history at all that I could attach it to. Now, I did attach it to February 16th is the date of Zechariah chapter 1, verse 7 in 519 BC. So that's the 24th day of the 11th month. So, you know, I could attach those two Zechariahs together and have some significance of February 16th. But to me, that still wasn't enough. There had to be something about it. So, and this to me is significant. So when I talk about the fact that I had this in a dream, it's not to focus upon that I had it in a dream. It's that it's in a dream, and to me there's a significance about this. Because in my dream, I was told to add February 16th to February 16th. So here we have February 16th, and I'm needed to add February 16th to February 16th. And that would be the solution. That's what I was told. And in my dream, and you know how dreams are, it's like you're running in a dream, you can't run. I could not add February 16th to February 16th. And I was converting it into Roman numerals, and I was doing all kinds of strange things in my dream to try to make it work, but it didn't work. But when I got up, I just thought about it. February 16th, if we were going to place this in the way that we're writing dates, we would say this is the second month and the 16th day, though we would usually write it in the other order, right? But let's just leave it in this order just because that's how we do our dates for now. And so I added 2 months to February. So if I add 2 months to February, what month will I get? So I'll get April. And then I have April 16th, and I'm going to add 16 days to April 16th. So then you'd go, I don't know how you do it, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th. You get May 2nd, right? So I knew that, but I was just counting again to make sure. So we get May 2nd. Now, of course, May 2nd is the date that Tabo was pointing to as the prediction before midnight. The second letter, right? So to try to write this in here, I guess I'll do it like this. So what I'm doing is I'm adding 2 months and 16 days to February 16th, and I'm getting May 2nd. So to me, now I can say, well, there's some significance in this. But then the dream is doubled. So what I do is I again add 2 months and 16 days to May 2nd. And what would I get? 2 months to May is June, July. Right, so July 18th. So here again, we have another testimony for July 18th, just like we have it up here in this 187 days. We again can add 2 months and 16 days to May 2nd, and that means this is the center of a prophetic mirror. So when he's writing about a prophetic mirror, the 70th week, he's publishing this at the very center of this prophetic mirror that points to May 2nd. So now we have this structure. And just to deal with this idea of these dates, so we have dates on our calendar, and I would never have thought of this at the time, to do this, to add February 16th to February 16th. I would not think of doing that because in my mind, our calendar isn't really related to the Jewish calendar. So when I did this at the time, I mean, maybe I knew that there was some relationship, but February 16th is 1 month and 16 days after he gave his testimony on December 31st. But we don't call it 1 month, we write it as second month, 16 days. So I was always looking at it as 1 month and 16 days. I wasn't looking at it 2 months and 16 days. But as a symbol, February 16th is the second month, the 16th day. So there's just kind of it means that January 1st on our calendar has significance as far, just like the first day of the first month does. Right? Does that make sense? And the transition from December 31st to January 1st, where he has his personal testimony, there's significance in that. So I know there's probably a lot more significance, and just thinking about it, I've thought about it for the last few months, how this all works and why it is this way. But let's just deal, before we go to your question here, Tanya, or comment. What's your comment?
Well, what gives you the right to double it up is because the article that was written in February 16 had been published twice.
Okay, so yes, the doubling. So we have that. We have dreams are doubled, and we have the articles published twice. So we can double it that way. And we're seeing all kinds of doublings. Like in the story of Joseph, we had all these doublings. Jacob and Joseph, we had the twins, and we had the 2 periods of 7 years, twice, and we had the dreams all doubled. And so we see all these doublings, and we see them in the 22nd, and we see them, which February is the second month, which is a doubling. But we also had that first one, November, which is a doubling 2 ones, and the 22nd. So it just becomes a little bit crazy as you start to try to think about all the things all the symbols that we can use to do this. So let's look at another doubling that happens. So this doubling, now this one I just really like. It's not the most important one, but I like it a lot because June 22nd, again, this is when a letter is written, not published. But this letter is published on June 27th. And June 27th on the Jewish calendar is the 11th day of the 3rd month. And if I double it, I get the 22nd day of the 6th month. And the 22nd day of the 6th month on our calendar is June 22nd. So the date that the letter is written, if it's converted to the Jewish calendar and then doubled, gives you the date the letter was written. So that's what's called a Gordian knot. It's a little puzzle that connects things together. It ties up things nicely mathematically, and it's just an amazing little piece of information. So not everybody likes that stuff as much as I do, but I love that. And then we also have this July 18th letter. It's published on June 29th. Now, June 29th, if you were to look at the calendar in 457 BC, is June 29th. Let me see if I got this right, because some of these things I get mixed up. June 29th. So if you look at the calendar in 457 BC, 457, so that would be the page before the 1844 one. And you can see that in 457 there's also a V8R added. But if we go to June 29th, yes, that's correct. So June 29th is Pentecost. And that's because, so this, I was going to put this is another one here. So June 29th, this is June 29th. So June 29th, which is tying the writing of this letter to Pentecost as well. Because June 29th in this year is Pentecost. In this year, it's not anything. It's the 13th day of the third month, which has some significance, but not enough to label it. So we're dealing with the year 457 BC. So in 457 BC, here, June 22nd is Pentecost. 457 BC is 1 week. The dates have 1 week added to them from 1844. So June 22nd is Pentecost here, June 29th is Pentecost here. And June 29th is when his last letter is published. So it's tying all these letters together with these dates. And even this May 1st letter, what is May 1st on our calendar? What is May? Which month is it? Fifth month. So the first day of the fifth month. Is that significant? Yeah. Yeah. So we can then tie that May 1st letter to this date, to the date at Exeter when he gives the midnight cry. So every date is accounted for and is significant. And now we have to try to understand why. So I'm going to lay now another line, which is basically our history. So there we looked at Millerite history, and I want to look at our history. Now, William Miller anticipated, let's put it that way, Samuel Snow's 10th day of the 7th month. And how did he do that? Tanya, how did William Miller anticipate the 10th day of the 7th month?
On May 3rd, 1843.
Right. So in 1843, William Miller wrote a letter. Now this letter, the first time it's published actually I think is much later.
Right.
And
Written on the 3rd.
it's printed when?
The 17th, I think, late on in the month.
It's published that year? I couldn't find it published that year. I couldn't find it published until 1844 because it was a letter written to I believe Joshua V. Himes. I should know this stuff. It's in our book, the Third Angel's Messages source book. So let's just go here. And I put it in the material dealing with the midnight cry, I believe. Yeah. All right. It's not in our book. It's in the paper that I gave you. I gave you that extra paper. It's page 78, I think. So it's not in the book. It's in the extra pages. And if you have a new printing of the book, it'll be in there. But anyway, it's not that important. All we know is that the year before Samuel Snow was presenting the midnight cry, we have this, and this is new light upon what Miller already understood. So here we have Miller in 1843. The date really isn't that important as far as I know, but he talks about the 10th day of the 7th month as being the types. The types are going to be fulfilled in the fall. Now he's looking at the fall of 1843. He's not looking at the fall of 1844. But he says, if we're going to place a time when Christ is going to return in 1843, the 10th day of the 7th month makes a lot of sense. But he wrote this in a note, and I couldn't find it published anywhere until 1844, where it was brought out at the time of Samuel Snow. So, you know, if I can be corrected on that, if there's something I don't know about that, you know, somebody can please correct me. Now, in our history, we have an increase of light that has happened. So, you know, here we're going to have Miller, and then we're going to have Snow. In our history, do we have anything that prefigured the increase of light that we received in December?
Yeah, Brother Jeff, if you're talking about the light on Russia. Brother Jeff at the
Okay.
camp meeting and last
So here
Sunday.
we have Jeff, Brother Jeff, and he presents Russia. Now this was at Lambert in the summer, I believe it was in July, that he brought out the book New Lies for Old. And in doing this, to me, he's paralleling what happened here. Because Miller doesn't understand that Samuel Snow's coming. He doesn't understand all the light that's coming. And Jeff starts talking about Russia just out of context. He just happened to run across this book. And he did talk about it at the camp meeting as well. But here, the book presents the idea that the Soviet Union fell on purpose with a plan to come back at the United States. It realized it couldn't win that immediate war, but its plans were more far-seeing than the Americans realized. And so that when the Soviet Union fell, Moscow still was unaffected. So Jeff isn't understanding all of that, but he's presenting Russia and some of these ideas that later we came as we understood our mistake. So our mistake was what? What was our mistake?
USSR versus Russia.
USSR versus Russia. So our mistake was, when the USSR fell, just like everybody, USSR is gone, and the king of the South is no more. But the king of the South, we only came up to the neck. The head was Moscow, and the KGB and all their plans of what they wanted to do. And so we then had an increase of light showing that Russia is still a player in prophecy. Correct? So that's our understanding. So this would parallel with what happened in our history. So in our history, we have Daniel 11. And specifically, you know, what's the verse? Daniel 11:11, is it, or something like that? I can't remember the verse.
Which verse you want to look
Yeah, which is the verse where we...
11:11 is Russia.
Yeah, okay, 11:11, right. So Daniel 11:11 is where we had our increase of light upon our message. So to me, this is paralleling Samuel Snow. Now, if we're going to look at this structure that we have here of this chiasm, so here we have the 10th day of the 7th month, which is the Sunday law. And here, I'm going to move this over. Yep.
Coming up to the fortress.
Yep.
Yes. 11:10.
11:10.
This is
So-
when you come up to the fortress. That's
Okay, so we got 11:10 to 11. Okay. Did you have a comment there,
Yeah, I
Tanya?
found that it was actually published in the Signs of Time, May 17, 1843.
Okay, so it was published then.
Yes, and it's found in the Advent Herald Sign of Times, October 9, 1844.
Okay, see, so I saw it there. I couldn't find it in the first one. So that's May 17th, 1840,
1843 in the Signs of the Times.
in the Signs of the Times. Okay. So yeah, I couldn't find it for some reason, looking for it. It should have been easy. I typed in the words from the article, and they just never showed up anywhere except that one place. So thanks a lot for that. So we know we have the midnight cry. So we got the first day of the 5th month. And then we have midnight. So we got the midnight cry. And then we have the 5th day of the 4th month. So that's midnight. And way back here, we've had always this first day. Well, maybe I should put it here. First day of the 1st month. And this is 9/11. So when Samuel Snow's at Boston and he proclaims it's midnight, what is the basis for him saying that it's midnight? Yeah, so he's saying that it's the middle of the night. And he's marking the night from the first day of the 1st month to the 10th day of the 7th month. Correct? Because he says, how long have we been in the tarrying time? 3 months. Right? So he's going back to April 19th. Over here, he's at July 21st. 3 months and 2 days. He doesn't realize he's exactly in the middle of that period from the first day of the first month to the 10th day of the 7th month. He just knows that he's 3 months in. He didn't count out and find he's 94 days in of a period of 187 days.
Would you like me to read it?
Yeah, if you want to read it.
Yeah, this is, okay, so Brother Snow does question them. Where are we in our Advent experience? Answer from audience. In the tarrying time. Question. How long was the vision to tarry? Answer. Until midnight. Question. What is a day in prophecy? Answer. A year. Question. Then what would a night be? Answer. 6 months. Question. Then what would midnight be? Answer. 3 months. Question. How long have we been in the tarrying time? Answer. Just 3 months. He said, then it is just the midnight now, and I am here with the midnight cry.
Okay, Clayton.
I think the comments that Jeff made were not before 9/11. So that kind of, the way you have that laid out, kind of makes it look like they were. So
Right.
I don't agree with that.
I understand what you're saying. So when we look at this, we have to think that this is somehow zooming in. So to put 9/11 here, obviously this is not before 9/11. So what we're trying to understand is Samuel Snow's understanding, and this is basically taking something from a larger reform line and looking at this in a smaller way. Does that make sense? Because obviously the first day of the first month is 9/11, right? So what Clayton is trying to say. And here we're putting Jeff over here dealing with this new light on Russia. But obviously Jeff's over here when he makes this comment. Right. But we do know, if we're looking at Samuel Snow, that Samuel Snow is, we're going to try to sort this out. He's doing stuff here before 9/11, if you wanted to look at it that way. He has all these letters that he's writing. He has his, February 16th letter that's published on the 22nd, and then it's published on, April 3rd. These are all before the first day of the first month, right? So, we can't put Samuel Snow, if we're looking at this line that way, we can't put Brother Jeff, here, and we can't put, what the new light here. We have to somehow look at this as being a symbol of something, right? In our history, in our specific unfolding of light, not of the whole period, right? So we've zoomed in and we've taken these symbols, and we can see that they now have significance in our history. But yes, we're not saying that this is before 9/11, okay? So, and this is a problem that we have when we zoom in, because we're zooming in and we're trying to find more details, and this means that 9/11 is typifying something that's happening in our history, is one way to look at it, okay? So 9/11, there's a separation that happens at 9/11, and we're going to see that this symbol then in our history deals with the separation. We'll try to look at this. So if there's any questions or comments, or you think I'm going astray, definitely speak up. Now, trying to understand this in this context, and I can't remember exactly what I was going to do here next, but we do know that we originally didn't have, midnight, and as we've developed this message, we've gotten more detail. And we came to understand, that midnight probation was going to close for the priests, and we originally looked at this as kind of the binding off period. And there's a group of people who have taken that idea and moved everything past midnight. But what we found as we come towards midnight is that these events that are attached to midnight don't come all in one point, they come to us step by step. Yeah, so we have this progression, like driving into a city, you first come into the city limits, and then you start hitting the suburbs, and then, well, maybe the industrial area. It depends on the city you're driving into and where you're going. But the point is, you don't just arrive to the point on the map, that one dot, all at once. And so as we're approaching midnight, God has been showing us that these things that we all attach to midnight are happening to us before we get to that point we call midnight. And yes,
So you're saying there's multiple 9/11s after 9/11 is what you're saying?
no. I'm saying 9/11
Wouldn't you
symbolizes-
represent those on a different line then, since the one chronologically is not before the other? Meaning this is a zoomed in line
Yes.
and this is a zoomed
So,
out line?
If we were going to look at it here, you know, we have the time of the end. What we're looking at is this point here, which we call midnight, is now expanded to this. If you want to look at
Yeah,
it this way.
that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so we're now using these as symbols. So this is our line, but we can see that this becomes a symbol. Yeah. Obviously, we could not do. You know, we couldn't do what Clayton's talking about. We couldn't just put this all before 9/11 because 9/11's already passed. And this helps solve the problem when we're trying to look at this idea of sunset, because here we have Samuel Snow saying that this is midnight, so he's applying at the first day of the first month. And see, that's the thing, is the first day of the first month is here in 1844, right? Now we also have the empowerment, if we wanted to look at it this way. I'm just going to erase this.
He's putting it at the first month. What is he putting there?
He's putting sunset. The beginning of this day, of this night, because he's here at midnight, so he's placing sunset here,
Amen.
right? So we'd have to say this is sunset. But now, we've already said the first day of the first month is 9/11, right? And in Millerite history, we know that August 11th, 1840, is what we parallel with 9/11. So I'm going to do it this way, and we're just discussing this. This is not adamant things. This is just a way of trying to understand what this light about sunset means. So we would say this parallels 9/11, right? Because 9/11, that's the empowerment of the first angel. And this is the empowerment of the first angel. Right? So the first angel is empowered here.
Actually, we do that because of Islam.
Yes, because of Islam.
Yeah, it becomes a symbol. That's how we connect 9/11 with August 11.
Yeah. But we know that this is also April 19th. Right, and April 19th is the second angel arrives. Let's put that as first angel. So the second angel, I guess I'll do it this way. It's the first angel empowered. Yeah, that's better. So we have the second angel arrives here on the first day of the first month. And so what we have done in our line is we have said the second angel, so here we got 1798 back here somewhere. But in our history, 1989 is back here, but we have the second angel arriving in our history here. Does that make sense? I know I'm mixing two lines together. So we say that this is also the first day of the first month. Does that make sense? How I'm doing this? Because I'm mixing the two lines, you can get confused. So obviously August 11th, 1844 is not the first day of the first month. At least we've never looked at it that way. 1840, yes. August 11th, 1840. So in trying to understand this as sunset, this creates a problem. Because the first time Chao Tu showed me sunset, I said, well, you have a problem because you're separating 9/11 and sunset. He wasn't, April 19th is the arrival of the second angel. The second angel has to arrive at 9/11. Right? Now, why does the second angel arrive at 9/11? Why? What's our reasoning for the arrival of the second angel?
Points out that Revelation 18:1-3 began to fulfill
Okay.
9/11, which is actually the message of the fourth angel's message. It's the same message as the second angel's message in Revelation 14. The only difference is one is spoken with a regular voice and the other one with a mighty strong voice.
Okay, so we have the other angel. And,
Theodore,
yes.
in our forensic life sketches, 411, paragraph 5.
Okay, life sketches, 411,
paragraph
paragraph 5. Now this other angel, there's other places, of course, we could reference that. But Ellen White talks about the third angel arriving October 22nd, 1844. So if we look back in Millerite history, the third angel arrived October 22nd, 1844, and she says it continues all the way to the end. And so this is an idea that some of you have heard me talk about, but when we look at our history, we have the first angel arriving, we have the second angel arriving, and we sometimes try to place the arrival of the third angel. But really, Ellen White says that this other angel joins the third angel. So, I mean, the third angel has to be at 9/11 because the other angel has joined it. But that means it already had to have been there. It didn't come, in my understanding, they don't just come together there at 9/11. And you can't have a third without the first and the second. So the first and the second in our history have to arrive. The second angel arrives with the empowerment of the first angel, because the fourth angel, or the other angel, is the second angel. Right? It has all the characteristics of the second angel. So when it empowers the first angel, it's an empowering angel. This angel is empowering the first angel. It's going to empower the second angel here. And then, for the first time in history, the third angel is going to be empowered. And it's empowered at the Sunday law. And so there's a difference about our history than any other history, and that's because in no other history is the third angel empowered. It always arrives, and then there's a falling away. But in our history, the third angel is empowered. So that's a little bit different than some people present it, and there might be ways in which we could understand it or explain it differently, but that's the way I look at it, is that the fourth angel, this is the period of the empowerment, where everything is completely empowered and God finishes his work that he began at creation. So then to understand this, and we're obviously going to spend a bit of time on Sunday going through this with Parminder here. We're going to go through this line again, and we're going to discuss the idea of sunset and some of the solutions that we have. So the thing about sunset, if we look at Samuel Snow's letters, so let's go back over here. We know the first day of the first month is, as a symbol, it's 9/11. And we have here a disappointment, but we have these two Passovers. Now, I did spend some time with the Passover and looking at it. So the Passover is in the time of Christ. We have Judas and the disciples. We have two classes. And Judas and the disciples are bound off at the Passover. So in our history, if we're going to look at this as a parallel, what I'm suggesting is that something happened in our history already, which we can call sunset. And that is, I'm placing two Passovers. We have the Passover of Judas, and we have the Passover of the disciples. And these are the binding off of the tares and the binding off of the wheat. And this increase of light that became manifest in this history in a progression, right? So it didn't happen all at once. So the first understanding of this, if the way that I understand it, is when we came to understand Daniel 11 verse 1 to 4, did Omega accept Daniel 11 verse 1 to 4? Right, so they accepted the first part. There was an increase of light on Daniel 11 where we saw that Daniel 11 verse 40 to 45 had connections with Daniel 11 verse 1 to 4. And so we can now see that our history had details in the history of Daniel 11, at least 1 to 4 at that point, that was giving more insight into what was happening to us now. Correct. And so this group Omega accepted this light. But then what happened is that more light came. But they were already going off in darkness. Now, one of the darknesses that Omega has, and not everybody's familiar with this, but it's been an issue of chronology. They have not accepted the biblical chronology that has the light that has been coming from biblical chronology. They don't accept specifically that the fall of Babylon is referring to a civil calendar here on the chart. They want this to be our calendar, January 1st to December 31st. And if we compare this with Millerite history, we have two groups of people. One group that is accepting the light on the calendar, and those people accept the midnight cry. They go on to accept it, but it happens in a progression. But there's a group of people here who never pass beyond the first day of the first month, and they never receive the blessing of the 1335 days, right? Because they are not just like in the disclaimer in the April 3rd republication of Samuel Snow's first letter, nothing happens beyond the Jewish year 1843. So obviously there's a group of people who are going to understand this increase of light from Samuel Snow, and a group of people that didn't. So if we look at our history, and some of these people accepted some of the initial ideas, but as they came closer and closer and they went through this disappointment, it separated two classes. And so I'm suggesting that this has happened in our history, that this represents the Omega, and this represents this group of people. And that means that we've passed sunset, my suggestion is, right? Now there's other problems that arise when we look at this, but let's just go on and look at Samuel Snow's letters and see what is coming next. So in my understanding of it, which is just my understanding, we have this separation that happened. And this May 2nd letter has, which becomes the center of this chiasm, has the day before it a teaching about the false teachers, right? So he writes a letter about the false teachers. And so what he's describing, if you read the May 1st letter, he's describing Omega. And then he has this insight, which we were calling the prediction before midnight or the point before midnight, though we have to sort of see this whole thing as all developing to a prediction that's going to happen on July 18th, not on the date, but as a symbol, 3 days before midnight. So 3 days before midnight is a symbol of the prediction before midnight. So God wants us to give a message to the Levites, and we have to have that message ready 3 days before midnight, because we're going to give a message, and when midnight occurs, and it doesn't mean it's 3 days, but when midnight occurs, there will be a people who have presented exactly what's going to happen. Now, if we look at this, there's another important step to get here. And what is this, June 22nd? It's Pentecost. So what is Pentecost?
Pentecost actually having to do with a covenant.
Okay, it's a covenant. And of course, the last letter is called confirming the covenant. So it's all tying together.
The first fruits of the church triumphant.
Okay, first fruits of the church triumphant. Organization. Would you say organization is symbolized by Pentecost? Because what is it? It's unity of people and message. Right? So if we look at Pentecost as a symbol of what's happening now, can we see any parallel to what we are studying and what we're doing that could be symbolized by Pentecost? Yes, definitely. We're talking about organization. So we're seeing that if we're going to give a message to the church, to the Levites, to Seventh-day Adventists who are sincere and honest in heart, who have been studying, then we are going to have a united message. Right now, is our message united? No, not yet. You know, we have lots of different ideas, lots of different people. Are we organized as a people? Yeah. Are even we united, you know, individually as a people? Are we together on everything? No, we have conflicts, personality conflicts. We have differences of views, and we don't even have a system in which we can work together that's clear, right? Which is part of why some of the problems exist. So Tyler's been discussing organization in his afternoon classes, and we've been learning a lot about organization and what God has to do. So if we look at Samuel Snow's letters as symbolizing what's been happening, I think we can find a really solid basis to say that we at least are past that first disappointment, and we are now at this place which is the binding off of the wheat. Right? Because the binding off of the tares would have occurred. Right? Because the tares are bound off first. Any thoughts on this? You know, any ideas that come? Yes, Olivine.
What about October 22nd?
Okay. October 22nd, what about it?
Because if you're pointing April 19th as the binding off of the wheat, what really occurred October 22nd, when from the movement that started out, I'll say 1840, there was only 50 left. Okay. October 22nd.
So this is a good question. One of the things we have to look at in this history, we can't look actually beyond October 22nd. Because October 22nd, what happens there? Is that the empowerment of the third angel?
That's the arrival.
It's the arrival of the third angel. So the third angel is not empowered. And that history that follows, even though we can use it and we can lay it over top of some things in our history, the third angel is going to be empowered. So there's a difference in our history than in Millerite history. Yes, Tanya.
So from my studying of the first, second, and third angel's message, the history of Lot and Abraham really points out that the first two angels' message does the work of basically binding, or I would say pronouncing judgment, but also executing judgment. And the work of the third angel's message, which is basically represented by Jesus Christ and his work that he did in the life of Lot, was basically to protect those that needed to flee out of Babylon, so they would not be scorched by the punishment. So there's a difference. The first two angels' message are actually the one that finish the whole separation and executing the judgment. The third one, angel's message, basically is to protect those that have chosen to follow God.
Yeah. And ultimately, the third angel's message it should demonstrate who are the ones that have been called, chosen, and now faithful. Yes.
Theodore,
Yeah.
isn't it the third angel that brings judgment?
Yes. Third angel also brings judgment.
So, but
Yeah.
the two angels that went down to Lot, down to Sodom, aren't they who protected Lot?
They just took him out of the city and left him there.
No, they protected Lot.
But yeah,
When the
Okay,
when the men
let's leave
came
this
at
point
the door,
apart. Let's
there
leave that
was
point out.
darkness.
It's
Okay.
true.
No,
I
the
Richard.
point I'm making
Yeah.
is the third angel is who brings judgment. Not, and you have to be protected by the first two. You're protected from the effect of the third.
Of the third. Yes,
Yes.
by being called out. Yes.
Yeah, I remember when you was talking about just another way to understand it, so maybe you could elaborate on it more. But just how the sunset is the end of the
Okay.
preparation day.
Right, so I was going to talk about that, but I just sort of wanted to clear some of these other things a little bit first, see if there was any thoughts on that. So one of the things that we did, and it was in Wednesday night worship last week, in the prayer meeting, is we looked at the reform line of, the first reform line, which is the reform line of Genesis 1, right? And we had a period of darkness, and then we had the time of the beginning, right? And then we had an increase of light, right? Because God said, let there be light. That's the first message. And then the formalization of the light was the separation of the light from the darkness, and he called the light day and the darkness he called night. So we had first angel arrive, first message arrive, first message is formalized. And then it was empowered, we came to understand, on the fourth day. And on the fourth day, God created the sun and the moon and the stars. So the first sunset is actually on the fourth day, because there is no sun until the fourth day. And at the end of the fourth day, you would then have sunset. So sunset is marking the end of the fourth day. Right? Does that make sense? So this day, when sunset comes, it's ending a day. So what is the day that ends, and what is the day that begins?
Fourth and the fifth.
Yeah. So this is the day of the Lord's preparation, right? At sunset, that day ends. And then what are we in at sunset?
And it's marked by 45.
Okay. does this make sense what I'm suggesting? Some of you haven't thought about this before. Tyler.
I get your logic,
Yeah.
but the problem that I've had with saying we've already passed sunset is quotes that say it would be well if we had all our accounts and all our relationships and everything dealt with before sunset, because when sunset comes it's too late, or it's the end.
Well, because there's something that happens, so it says it would be well. Does it say we have to?
I think
Or that we must,
I
or
wouldn't
we
read
will.
it as well. I would read you have to. I
You
would read it.
as that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would read it differently. So I read it as, this is something we need to do. We need to get our accounts straightened. But something happens at sunset that if we had our accounts straightened, we would be better off.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's right.
this is a choosing of a people that are then going to go through a process, right? So something has been fixed at sunset, because sunset represents a sleep, and when you go to sleep, when you die, because sleep represents death, there isn't a change that happens while you're asleep. So something, not everything, but something becomes fixed. And my suggestion is Parminder can talk about this, but this spring when he was talking about the close of probation for us, he was saying it wasn't about character, it was about accepting a message. And to me, what has happened is the message separation has occurred here. There's people who have gone off into darkness, they can't reason from cause to effect, and then there's a group of people that God has now chosen, and this group of people, because many were called, few are chosen, now a group of people is chosen, and we look at this group of people and we see all their defects of character, and we look at ourselves and we see our defects of character, and so we say, sunset couldn't have happened because we need to have everything correct. But God still has a work to do with us in character, but if sunset has passed, it could be possible that this is the raw material that God's now going to work with, and we just have to accept that. And that means we can't look at other people and start to try to find who's, more tares and so forth. We need to start looking at ourselves. And the disciples, if we look at the story of the disciples and we look at the Passover, we have the Passover where Judas leaves. The disciples are there. So the disciples' Passover and Judas' Passover happen at the same time. But here, the first day of the first month is between those. Right? So if we're going to say that this is sunset, we have to say that these two Passovers obviously are symbolized in a sense by this point. And that point then, the first day of the first month also in 9/11 can represent the Passover, which we've done in lots of different histories. So, and we're going to do this on Sunday because I actually want to lay down a bunch of other lines where I look at sunset, but I'm not going to do that now because we wouldn't have time to do it. Yes, Olivine.
As it relates to what Tyler said, Judas went, and I'm not negating how you're placing that, but Judas went into sunset. His character was not yet fixed. So sunset, they sat down, the servant of the Lord is clear. The Lord washed his feet, which was his last attempt to touch Judas's heart and bring conversion. So therefore, it would be well, but we have the evidence there that after sunset, Judas could have turned.
Yeah, and these could haves and would haves and should haves are all things that we could talk about, but I want to deal just with this point that we have sunset symbolizing something, and we like to look at things as just happening all at once. It just happens, there's sunset, but this is a process that's happening. And so to try to place exactly where we are in this process, I'm not really prepared to do that, but I am suggesting that we're in this process somewhere. Yes, Bob.
I have a question. You talk about two Passovers there with Judas and the disciples. It's really one Passover,
Yes.
but during that Passover, you see that the tares are bound, and the disciples end up, being separated.
And the disciples have a work to go through. Look at Peter.
They still do.
Right?
Yeah.
And even when you get to Pentecost, Pentecost doesn't happen at Passover. It doesn't happen at the sunset when the sun sets at Passover. Pentecost happens later. So as we look at this, and there's so many things that I can't bring now, but when we look at this, we see this happening again and again with sunset. Sunset marks the close of something, the day of the Lord's preparation, but there still is a further work that is being done because those people are now in a condition where they're not going to turn back. Yes, Richard and then Tyler and then Tanya.
One of the things about Judas at the table is that he gets up and he leaves the table. I think that's a key point. So he has this opportunity, but he leaves. And then God begins to reveal more light to the disciples, which he couldn't do while Judas was still at the table.
Right.
And for me, that's one of the things I saw with last camp meeting, because the brethren in arms, we recognized there was something just a little off, and now we know what that is. But also with that, we were discussing in probably the past 7-8 months about how, and I couldn't prove everything now, but we were recognizing that God is doing this work with this message, and we were saying amongst ourselves that our issue now is the putting away of sin.
Right.
Because he's given us the light that is allowing us to do this final work of preparation of character. And I say that because yesterday I was having an issue with that, but it was something I had already believed, and but I forgot about that. So the last work he's doing is now is the time to put away sin.
So this June 22nd Pentecost letter, Samuel Snow, we looked at this yesterday, said it was necessary that a disappointment occurred so that it could separate these two classes. Basically, that's the gist of his letter, right? So if we look at this light that he has here, in order for Pentecost to occur, Judas has to be separated because they're still thinking about who's the greatest, at that point. But now, once they go through that experience of the cross, that disappointment, they start to do a work that they hadn't done before. When they come to Pentecost, they become united. So, Tyler.
I don't have a problem with saying that sunset is the end of preparation day, and it's the beginning of Sabbath, but the implications of that, like you're saying, is that it's the beginning of Sabbath, and we've all just potentially walked into Sabbath with sin, or with strife, with difficulties, with all of these things that are not supposed to cross the Sabbath border, because if they cross the Sabbath border, you're not prepared for Sabbath.
Okay, so sunset, when does sunset happen on a Jewish calendar? When do they mark sunset?
In the calendar or a day?
When do they mark sunset?
Crosses the horizon?
Okay, when is even? So there's the going down of the sun. But when has the sun set?
When you can't see the sun anymore?
Oh.
Past the horizon?
There's a point of time from when the sun disappears to when it gets dark. That's called between the two evenings, or twilight in English. So sunset doesn't just happen in a single point. And I know what you're saying, but when we look at all these symbols, we can see that sunset symbolizes a separation. But we know, if we look at the Passover and we look at all the different lines together, that this doesn't all happen at once, and that there's a work that happens after sunset. And if we deal with Passover as a symbol, Passover is connected with Pentecost. As Jeff said, Pentecost doesn't just show up. Pentecost is a process that began 50 days earlier, or even more, because it begins with the Passover. And then you have the day after the Passover, the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then you have the first fruits. And from the first fruits to Pentecost is 50 days. So this whole process we have to look together. But one of the things that we can do, that I think is a valid argument, is that we can see that, sunset is connected to midnight because this night begins at sunset. But we can also see that sunset is connected to the previous day before. And so we can look at 9/11 in a sense as being stretched out from 9/11 to sunset. We can put 9/11 and sunset together as a symbol because they both are the first day of the first month. But as we experience them in history, they're separated by time. But they are the same symbol, and it's the same process. So to try to get bogged down to exactly to place something at a point, I think becomes a problem, because the symbol is just showing us the work that needs to be done. And it's done for different individuals at different times. So Tanya has a comment. So,
I want to point out that what Brother Richard was saying, that he left the table, he actually left the two tables, because when you put them together, you have one table. He left the truths that were on the tables. You see what I'm saying?
Amen.
Judas,
Right.
that's what he did.
Right.
My second comment is that when we're dealing with the history of Christ, we have to recognize who are the priests and who are the Levites. From my point of understanding, Jesus represents the priest in that point. And so then why? Because the priests are the ones, Jesus becomes our high priest, but he also at that point is becoming the lamb. But Sister White points out that all of them are kind of happening together. I mean, he's being prepared for both of these things. So we see that when Jesus was chosen as the lamb to be sacrificed, it was at sunset. It was towards the end. And because of that, then we can recognize that priests have a closing of I say probation or whatever time that they have to be ready way before the Levites do, because we see Peter further down that he still has to be repenting at that point.
except that we know that the disciples and Judas are symbolizing the binding off of the priest. So there's things that we have to sort out.
That's another level of history.
Okay,
That's
so
a
Bob,
different
yeah.
application.
My comment is, it makes a lot of sense if you look at sunset as identifying a separation. And when you separate, where you're separating the wheat from the tares, that's actually what, you know, at some level what sunset is representing at all the places you see it. There's a separation at 9/11. You know, there's a separation, you know, at different
The light and the
points.
darkness.
Right, but there's separation in all these different places, and the beauty of it is, even though they're bound, but so in a sense, sunset at that level, if there's a separation already, that means that there's already been a judgment. Okay, in a sense, because their probation is closed because they walk away,
Right.
but their door doesn't officially close until later.
Right. So there's a progression of the close of probation,
Yeah.
Sharmila.
So would you suggest that sunset is a progressive period beginning at 9/11?
Yeah. I think everything is a progressive period, pretty much. Yes, sunset, in a sense, begins at 9/11. Certain aspects of it. There's symbols that are at sunset that are at 9/11, and they're connected. Larry.
You have a chronology question in regards to Friday, Sabbath, or Thursday in regards to Matthew 26, verse 20. And then I want to go to Matthew 27.
26 and up.
Yep. Matthew 26:20. And this is in relation to sunset being Friday. So it says in verse 20, now when even was come, he sat down with the 12. Is that Thursday or Friday on a chronology?
That would be the end of Thursday, the beginning of Friday.
So if that's the beginning of Friday, then it says in chapter 27, verse 2, and verse 1, when the morning was come, all the chief priests and the elders, so we know that's the morning.
Friday morning.
So that's Friday morning.
Friday morning.
So, so my question is, if he's bound, we put this line here on Christ's line, can it answer for us sunset?
Yes.
I have a
So can we see it? I wanted to see it so I can.
There's the question you're asking is really big. So one of the things dealing with these types or these things like sunset, different events, even within the same line, have the same symbol. And these symbols, sometimes we just need to lay the symbols over top of each other. Because there's a sunset that happens when Jesus dies, right? And that sunset we can lay over top of that. There's stuff that happens at sunset from the 9th to the 10th day, because that's when the Lamb is chosen, is on the 10th day. So Jesus is there standing, weeping over Jerusalem on the 9th day, which is Sunday. And then after sunset, or at sunset, he goes into the temple. And so now he's chosen as that Lamb. And then 4 days later, he then has the Passover with his disciples. And then the next day, he dies, right? And so each of these points we say they all represent sunset. We want to all lay them out on a line and say, well, how does this whole line fit with our line? And we can do that. But sometimes we take each of these sunsets and we just lay them over top of our sunset and say, what does this show us about sunset? Does that kind of answer your question? Yeah. So it is a big question. And I think, we have so much to sort out to try to, my suggestions here just come from the understanding of Samuel Snow's letters and the understanding of Passover. But there's still disagreements regarding Passover in this message. One of the things is we talk about Jesus is slain as the Passover lamb. As we've learned that that lamb that escaped from the priest when Jesus was dying upon the cross and the veil of the temple was ripped in two, that wasn't the Passover lamb, that was the evening sacrifice. But for years, 30-some years, I always believed it was the Passover lamb. Now Jesus is our Passover because the Passover lamb represents Christ. But the Passover lamb was slain on the Thursday evening, not Friday evening, because Jesus ate the Passover meal with his disciples. So this understanding creates a lot of problems because people have all kinds of questions that you have to try to resolve when you look at it this way, because we just have this thinking of how, and we looked at the Exodus, that's why we looked at the Exodus, and we looked at the Passover, and we saw that the Passover lamb was slain on the evening of the 14th, which is the beginning of the 14th, not the end. And it was slain between the two evenings at twilight. It was prepared. They ate it at midnight, right? They had to stay in their houses until the morning. And then the next day, they gather together in Ramses, spoil the Egyptians, and then the next morning, they leave Ramses with a high hand on the 15th. And there's so many disagreements among Jews and Christians about how the Passover was kept the first time and how it should have been kept in the time of Christ, that this creates a whole big controversy. So we have to sort these things out, because if we don't have the literal correct, we're going to make mistakes on the spiritual. So, so there's some big questions that, I'm going to be gone next week and other people can sort them out. And so, it's interesting. We're just kind of getting a start on this. But we will look again on Sabbath. I'm going to go through and show basically the chiasms and not really discuss so much all the details, maybe just a little bit, the implications of what all these four chiasms mean. Try to do that in an hour. And then on Sunday, with Parminder here, we'll go through this again and talk about it and find out what things he's learned in Romania that we can look at. And and then we have the Wednesday class where we're going to go through some more of Samuel Snow's letters, specifically the True Midnight Cry and his prophetic chronology. And there are some things we can learn from that. But, we've just started a process, to me, of trying to examine this with a more solid chronological basis. So we've talked about sunset, it's been placed there, but I think understanding more of this chronology of Samuel Snow's letters and understanding the significance of each letter will give us light on how to sort through this sunset. And so we've had some really good points. But as we can see, there's problems, right? So we haven't solved all the problems by any stretch as we look at this. So, this is probably what's going to be happening over the next while. Camp meeting, of course. Hopefully we get it all sorted out and Pentecost comes and then we have the prediction before midnight and then midnight comes and then it's all over. That would be really nice. Let's close with prayer, and I really appreciate all the discussion. Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful for the light that you are placing upon our path, that is being unfolded from the midnight cry, that's been shining upon our feet over these past few years as we seek the old paths. We are thankful, Lord, that you have worked in our lives individually in so many different ways, and that we are all so different, and yet we are seeking to be like Christ. We just pray, Lord, for your Holy Spirit to rest upon this school, upon each person here, that you can protect us and keep us, that you can inspire us to study and to dig deep into your word. And we leave all things in your hands, Lord. We ask for further leading and guidance in organization, in our personal lives and uniting with you, in our personal problems, uniting with each other. And we pray that this day will be a blessing, that you can keep us all safe. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.